prevent Russia from attacking other nations.
And there can be no hope that Russia will simply stop on its own. And there can be no hope that reason will prevail and the Russian authorities will simply refuse to continue this war. Russia can only be forced to do so, can only be forced to seek peace, be forced to stop torturing people, be forced to respect the independent life of the neighbouring nations, be forced to leave the territory of Ukraine.
The Prime Minister's spokeswoman says Boris Johnson has agreed to the Chancellor's request of an independent review of his finances. Well, it's after it emerged that Rishi Sunak held a US green card while in office and that his wife holds non-domicile status. He says he followed the rules and hopes the review will provide further clarity. The Shadow Justice Secretary Steve Reed told GBNews the Chancellor's failure to declare his wife's non-dom status is one of many concerns.
The Finance Act that's just gone through Parliament, there are changes to the rules that benefit wealthy non-doms. Now, under the Ministerial Code, ministers are supposed to declare that kind of thing so that they can recuse themselves and not take part in decisions that will affect their own household income. There are a whole list of concerns like that about Rishi Sunak's behaviour, and we need to get to the bottom of it.
Millions of people in the UK will see a rise in their state pension from today, but it won't be enough to match the growing cost of living. Pensions and universal credit benefits have increased by 3.1%. But the Office for Budget Responsibility says inflation could hit a 40-year high of 8.7% later this year. Pensions analyst Helen Morrissey told GBNews the financial boost is not enough.
With inflation already at 6.2% and looking to go higher over the next few months, it's a drop in the ocean when they're battling against soaring bills and food costs. Heating costs are on the rise as well, and they're going to really struggle to make ends meet, particularly those people who are very, very dependent on the state pension.
Lorry drivers staging a protest in Dublin are being fined for blocking main roads to the port. They're demonstrating against fuel prices, and the drivers shut off a toll bridge and threatened to bring a complete lockdown to the city. They're also demanding the resignation of the Transport Minister, Eamon Ryan. In France now, and Emmanuel Macron will face Marine Le Pen in the second round of the presidential election. Both were seen back on the campaign trail in northern France and Paris this morning. The incumbent president and his far-right rival came out on top in Sunday's first-round vote, setting up a repeat of their 2017 runoff. A number of polls are predicting that Macron will win with a tight margin. All the major candidates in the election, bar one, have now called for tactical voting against Le Pen. The Queen has revealed she was left very tired and exhausted during her bout of coronavirus in February. The monarch made a video call to Royal London Hospital this week, sympathising with a former COVID patient who lost his brother and father to the illness. The Queen tested positive in February of this year, and despite suffering what Buckingham Palace called mild cold-like symptoms, Her Royal Highness was determined to carry out the duties she could.
I'm glad that you're getting better, and it does leave one very tired and exhausted, doesn't it, this horrible pandemic.
You're up to date now on GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to Liam for On the Money.
And welcome to a 2-hour On the Money special, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. Coming up, benefits are uprated today, including the basic state pension, housing benefit and universal credit. Benefits received by millions of households are rising 3.1% for the next 12 months. It sounds a lot, but it's much less than the rate of inflation, the increase in the cost of living. So what do these rises, not rises, mean for you? We hold a detailed discussion. Plus, as the UK's energy crunch gets tighter, there are growing calls for the government to lift its ban on fracking, the controversial drilling method to extract shale gas, which some fear causes dangerous earthquakes. We hear from a major UK company that supports fracking. And each day On the Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview. Today we're talking about the UK's media industry, in particular the future of Channel 4. Government plans to privatise the broadcaster are proving controversial. We talked to one of the UK's most experienced broadcasting executives. She opposes the plan. As ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. But stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan. You're on the money. Now, today's a big day if you live in one of the 52% of UK households that receive some form of state benefits. That's right, over half of families get regular state benefit payments, with 12 million on the state pension, over 7 million households receiving child benefit, 6 million on universal credit, and around 3 million living in homes paid for with housing benefits. It's the sheer numbers receiving benefits, which is why uprating them each year is so expensive. Some say Chancellor Rishi Sunak should have done more in last month's spring statement to help cash-strapped families. But from today, benefits go up just 3.1% for the coming year, while the official inflation forecast, the cost of living, is set to rise 7.4% over the next 12 months. 7.4%? 3.1%? Everyone on benefits is on course to get less money in real terms after inflation over the coming year. Why? Because each April, benefits are increased by the rate of inflation the previous September, and that was 3.1%. Since then, though, inflation has spiralled, pushing up prices much more. From today, for instance, the basic state pension is uprated by £5.50 a week. If it was increased to reflect official inflation forecasts, the rise would be much more, £13.30 a week. Universal credit for joint claimants over 25 years of age goes up by £15.81 a month from today. Again, an inflation-adjusted rise will be much more, £37.62 a month. These are big benefit gaps, not least for vulnerable households, and the shortfalls I've highlighted, they assume inflation will be 7.4%. Lots of independent economists, me included, think the cost of living will actually rise much more over the coming months. So that's our On the Money question today. Why are benefit rises so much less than the cost of living? Here on The Money, we're focused on how these benefit changes impact you, and one of the biggest groups affected are, of course, pensioners. Before we discuss these benefit changes in the round, our Wales reporter Lily Hewitson has been talking to elderly people in Pontypool, South Wales, to get their take on these below-inflation state pension rises.
This fantastic bistro in Pontypool, which is run by Age Connect Torfaen. Now, it's a charity that supports older people in the local area, and we're here to talk about the state pension and how it's changing a little bit today. It's going to increase by 3.1%, but actually, is that going to make any difference to people in their everyday lives when we're living in this cost of living crisis? So let's have a chat to a couple of people who are going to be affected by this change. Now, firstly, Sue, you have got a pension, but is it going to make much of a difference to you having this little bit of extra money every week when we are dealing with this cost of living crisis where everything seems to be a little bit more expensive at the moment?
Basically, no. I mean, the pension's going up maybe £4 a week if you're lucky. At the moment, my gas and electric has gone up £95, and that's not going to help me at all. They give it with one hand and they take it back with another. So there's very little hope of me making any profit type of thing from it. I'd be lucky if I managed to pay all the bills.
It's a rather scary situation, isn't it? Ron, how are you feeling about the pension? Are you going to see a bit of a difference? Is it going to be going up at all every week for you? And with this cost of living crisis, are you going to see much of a difference?
I'm very fortunate, really, because I'm comfortable with the income that I received, because I got an occupational pension and my state pension, and I got more income now than when I was working.
Well, that sounds like a great situation to be in. So you're happy with the little bit of the... I think there's a couple of people disagreeing here, but right, you're going full steam ahead with this.
But I did my financial planning from a very early age, and that's worked out very, very well for me.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear that this morning, Ron. Jane, I think, looking at your face, you might have a different opinion, perhaps, on what Ron's just said. 3.1%, is it going to make any difference to you at all?
No, not really, because the cost of living is going up. And people are talking about heating or eating. You know, that's the tagline. And I feel very strongly about that. As you get older, you need a warm house, you need good nutritional food, and it's not going to cover the cost because our bills are just going to go up, and it's not going to happen.
Are your friends in particular worried about this? I'm sure, like, your friendship circle, they'll be, you know, perhaps benefiting differently from the 3.1% going up. But what is the general consensus with them? Is everyone kind of feeling the same way?
They're all feeling a bit grumpy. Yes, they feel it's not enough to meet the rising costs. And unfortunately, this all ties in with the global economy. We know what's going on in the world. Very worrying. But, you know, we're living here in the lovely borough of Torvine, and we're just all doing our best. But the old folks need looking after.
Right, there's definitely some different opinions here this morning when it comes to the state pension. I think it's very much an individual situation, isn't it? But I think we're going to tuck into some hot cross buns and have some more tea and coffee. But for now, back to you.
Lily Hewitson there, our Wales reporter in Pontypool, South Wales. Time to bring in my panel now, and I'm joined today by former Treasury economist Julian Jessup. We've also got Sam Timms from the New Economics Foundation, and an On the Money regular in the studio, Max King, who's a columnist at Money Week. Great to have you all with me. Let's go to you first, Sam. We've been pointing this out for a while, haven't we? Even before the spring statement, it was clear benefits were only going to go up by 3.1% because that was the September inflation number. Were you surprised Rishi Sunak didn't do more in his spring statement?
You're right that we've kind of seen this coming for a while, definitely. I wouldn't say I'm surprised, but kind of realistically, we needed to see a lot more. So it's not a matter of whether or not I'm surprised. It's that morally and economically, the right thing to do would have been to increase benefits by the actual rate of inflation, so kind of the 7-8% rather than the 3.1, and also to have gone further, to have kind of reinstated the £20 uplift and made sure that actually our social security system really works as a safety net for those on the lowest incomes.
Let's go to you, Julian Jessup. In the end, the economy has to pay for everything. It's economic growth, economic expansion. We've seen today, we got some monthly GDP numbers out. GDP, the size of the economy as a whole, in February expanded just by 0.1% compared to January, much slower than was expected. Do you agree with Sam Timms that Rishi Sunak could have afforded to do more to uprate these benefits in line with inflation or not?
Well, I do agree with Sam, actually. First of all, as far as the economy is concerned, I mean, the headline numbers today may have looked a bit disappointing, but they were heavily distorted by swings in the amount that the NHS is spending on test and tracing and on the vaccines. If you look at private sector growth over the last couple of months, it's actually been pretty strong. And indeed, that's been reflected in the public finances over the last few months. The government has actually got in a lot more tax revenue than it anticipated because wages and prices have been higher. So there's plenty of room in the budget to have spent a bit more. Now, to be fair to the government, they did do some things in the spring statement that will help those on lower incomes. But I don't think any of those are really substitutes for increasing benefits in line with inflation. Even if you're not a fan of state welfare, it doesn't make a lot of sense to cut benefits by about 5% in real terms. So I would have been more generous on benefits too, even if that simply meant bringing forward some of the increase that we know will be happening next year based on where inflation is likely to be in the autumn.
Now, Max King, I know you don't take these monthly, month-on-month GDP figures that seriously, do you? Julian said why they may be a bit distorted. But what do you think of the fact that growth is slower according to the official numbers between January and February? And what do you think about this bigger question that could Rishi Sunak have been more generous?
I think monthly data is hugely unreliable, and it's a comparatively recent innovation. We used to do GDP estimates on a quarterly basis.
Every 3 months.
And they kept on being revised for about 5 years. So I think we should not take the 1 month data terribly seriously.
But we know growth is slower than he expected. The Chancellor had penciled in for this year 6% growth. We're not going to be anywhere near that.
Well, we've already seen the inevitable forecasts coming down, so I think that, and I think those are reasonable, but it's too soon to say whether they're right or wrong. I disagree with the panel about the benefits. I think it's always been the fact that state benefits lag inflation. So inflation goes up, the benefits are rated but based on the inflation figures 6 months ago, and that's bad news in the short term. But in a couple of years' time, inflation figures will be coming down because higher prices will generate more supply of agricultural products, of fuel, oil. Prices will be coming down. At that point, pensions and other benefits will be uprated significantly, and yet inflation will be much lower. So people who are losing out now will get it all back in a couple of years' time. And what the universal benefits fiasco over the lockdown showed is that it's a great mistake to make temporary changes. Because if you make a change and you tell everyone that's...
Well, they uprated it by £20 and then took that uprate away.
They shouldn't have uprated it by £20 because people always grumble, don't say thank you when it's going up, and they always grumble when you take it away from them. So it's actually best not to make short-term adjustments, just to let the system run.
Sam Timms, what do you think of that? Look, the benefit system, it's very, very complex. It's absolutely huge. It's tens of millions into the hundreds of billions of pounds. There are often injustices. For instance, people on disability didn't get the £20 uplift in universal credit. But Max King says it will come out in the wash next year. This autumn's inflation number will be very high. Next year, people will get a much bigger benefit rise.
Well, first of all, actually, in the past, we haven't always just based uprating on the previous September. Back in the 70s, when inflation was quite high and very volatile, we actually used a predictive model. So we kind of got ahead of the curve a little bit. To say that kind of this September it will be high, so next year it will all wash out. Realistically, that doesn't help people who are struggling right now. Food banks are struggling more than they ever have before, and people are struggling to feed themselves, to feed their kids, to heat their homes. That is happening right now, and kind of a change in a year's time isn't good enough. The Chancellor can still do more and should do more, and realistically should bring about a change to the benefit system as soon as possible. I do agree that it's best not to make short-term changes to the benefit system, because actually what you need is a system that provides income that is at an adequate level. And what we have right now is inadequate. It's been inadequate for a long time. We've had a decade of cuts to the social security system. And actually, had that not have happened, then people would be much better supported by the safety net than they currently are. And we wouldn't have even needed the uplift necessarily.
Julian, Sam Timms said we should go back to a methodology used in the 70s. You and I were around in the 70s. Didn't we end up going cap in hand to the IMF because the UK was technically bankrupt?
Yeah, well, hopefully the UK economy, and indeed I think the public finances are in better shape than many people think at the moment. I do take the point that you don't want to change the benefit system or any parts of the policy framework too frequently, but this is arguably an exceptional circumstance. I mean, we're facing a massive global shock with the surge, not just in energy prices, but in many other costs, including food as well. So I think it is right for the government to be flexible. And things do look very different from where they looked back in late last year when the decisions on benefits were made. So I think it's perfectly reasonable for the government to be flexible and a bit more supportive. I think the government is right though to focus on other things than just benefits. So I think it was good that they have made some tax cuts for low income earners by increasing the national insurance threshold and by making the taper for universal credit more generous. But I don't think those are substitutes for sticking with the system of benefits that we've got. And I think it doesn't really make an awful lot of sense to be uprating benefits by barely 3% when we know for sure that inflation is going to be 8% or more over the next few months.
Julian Jessop, former Treasury economist. Sam Timms from the New Economic Foundation, thanks a lot for joining me. Max King is going to stay with us. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan, on GB News, TV, DAB+, digital radio and online. After the break, we'll be talking to the director of a major company that supports fracking And the UK government ordered a review into the safety around the controversial drilling method. So stay with us. You're on the money.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
And welcome back. It's 1:23. You're on the money. Now, energy security has been rising up the political agenda, not least due to the war in Ukraine, which has caused petrol and fuel bills to spiral. The government wants to boost energy sources like nuclear, wind and solar. But ministers have also ordered a review into the controversial technique of fracking, recovering gas and oil from shale rock. But some green groups say the drilling process is unsafe. Well, the energy firm INEOS wants to put that to the test and has offered to stage fracking drilling tests to assess the safety of this procedure. Joining me in the studio here is the director of INEOS, Tom Crotty. Good to see you, Tom. And Charles McAllister returns to On the Money. He's from UK Onshore Oil and Gas, and Max King is still with us. Tom, good to see you in the studio. This debate is really heating up, so to speak. Is the government going to lift that moratorium? What's your instinct?
My instinct is they'll be very unwilling, if I'm honest. But what we're trying to do is pick up from where we left off 5 years ago and say, let's do the science, let's do it properly. Then you make an informed decision.
So what are you offering to do? What is INEOS offering to do that isn't already happening?
We are offering to work with the government and its authorities to find the right site to do a proper full test all the way through and say this can be done safely, because we know it can. It's been done safely in the US every day of the week.
And that's not, that's not any light undertaking. That's millions, tens of millions of quid Correct. You're offering to put on the table.
Correct.
Without knowing whether or not you're going to actually be able to do this for commercial gain.
Correct, absolutely. But we feel if now is not the right time, when is the right time to do this? We actually need this gas. We need UK gas, because why aren't we taking the UK exchequer with that money? Why are we giving that money to somebody else? Because we're importing 50% of our gas now.
Charles, you're from UK Onshore Oil and Gas. You want fracking to happen. Do you really think it's going to happen? Various government ministers, cabinet ministers, they got their heels dug in. They're saying no.
Yeah, I think the case for shale gas development in the UK is overwhelming for geopolitical, environmental and economic reasons. And if we look back at the history, we're 170 years old as an industry. During the Second World War, we drilled 400 wells in the UK. There were similar swells and activity during the Gulf War, Suez Crisis, oil embargo. If my predecessors 3-4 generations ago could deliver that amazing feat in 1942, we can damn well deliver.
This is not Texas. This is not South Dakota. We're much more crowded. It causes earthquakes.
Yeah, OK, so let's go land use first. 80% of the population live on 7% of the land, so there is room for development. This argument that we shouldn't develop shale because it will industrialise the countryside is absolutely nonsensical. The land use from shale, in terms of delivering kilowatt hours per kilometre squared per year, best technology the UK has at its disposal right now. To give you an example, a shale gas pad is roughly the size of Parliament Square. In London, to generate the same amount of energy from a wind farm, you would need a land area 10 times the size of Hyde Park. Solar farm, 6 times the size of Hyde Park. And
water supplies.
Water supplies.
Well, so a lot of people concerned about that. It undermines, it pierces aquifers and means that oil supplies are unsafe.
OK, so again...
What water supplies are unsafe?
What I always say to this is, if anyone wants to talk about this, describe what part of the regulations facilitate that process. I've never had a good answer to that. The UK regulations are unbelievably strong. In terms of how much water we would use, a report done by the Institute of Directors said even at full pelt, we would use about 1% of what agriculture and industry use in any 1 year. And I mean, look at the north of England. It's not exactly shy of rain. There's quite a lot of water in the north of England.
It's not so much about the actual supply of water. It's about water supplies themselves becoming contaminated.
OK, so again, look at the regulations. The Infrastructure Act bans fracking shallower than a kilometre. That's fine with us because the Bolan Shale is 2 kilometres deep. Again, what part of the regulations do people think are inferior? What part facilitates that? What is the process? What's the pathway and what's the receptor to deliver that? No, I've never had a good answer to that.
I'm going to come to you in a moment, Max, if I may. I just want to go back to you, Tom. This water supply issue, not the amount of water, but the purity of water, the contamination of water. Because quite a lot of the journalism, a lot of the documentaries that you would say are alarmist, but have been very, very widely watched, they focus on that issue, don't they?
They do, and some of them have been proved to be actually not just alarmist, but wrong and false and invented. So the guy lighting his tap, forget it. That was piped gas put through that tap. The reality is the only time this ever occurred in the very early days without proper regulation was because people were putting wastewater back down into holes. We're not allowed to do that. We have a wastewater directive in this country. Would not allow us to do that. It will not happen here. And, you know, that piece is absolutely guaranteed.
Max, you haven't got a particular dog in this fight. Obviously, you're really interested in the economy and investment and so on. We got 2 people from the fracking industry here, directly and indirectly, with respect to them. What do you think is going to happen? Will the government buckle?
Well, the government's got a simple choice. We can either import our gas from Russia and thereby finance Putin's war economy, or we can produce it ourselves. And even if we think that we're importing gas from North America or Qatar or wherever, we are diverting supplies which to ourselves, which could otherwise go to people who then will have to import their gas from Russia. So I think there's absolutely no question. I think the opponents of fracking basically are Putin's useful idiots, and they should really face up to the geopolitical realities. We have to reduce dependence around the world on gas from Russia.
But, Charles, you have got a PR mountain to climb, if I may be so bold as to point that out. There are many younger voters in particular that the Tories want to go after. They want to promote themselves as the nice party. Yep. There's a big green environmental lobby within the Conservative Party themselves, quite close to the Prime Minister. How are you going to overcome all that?
Hard work. I mean, I think that the case, again, if we look at this, the case for shale gas is in one word, logical. And I think most pragmatic people will see that. Again, if people want to discuss this, companies like INEOS and others I represent, we do public information days when there's a proposed site. Come and talk to us, come and find out about it. I think if you take a rational, realistic view, you will see the case. I want to deal with people who see sense, talk sense, make sense.
Tom, INEOS, big name. Quadrilla, your rival colleague have in the fracking industry. Both you guys are putting all your lobbying weight behind this. You're trying really hard to roll this boulder up a hill, if you want. Let me put it to you that the government is not going to bend. They are not going to let you do this. What are the implications?
I think the implications for the UK economy are poor, because basically we will go on importing more and more of our gas, bringing it from halfway across the world, which environmentally doesn't make any sense when it's under our feet, and pushing our money into other governments' pockets. So that's a big implication for the UK economy, and energy security is a big, big issue for us right now.
What could the UK fracking industry look like if you had your way?
I think if we had our way, I mean, we don't know the end story because we haven't been allowed to do it properly. If we're allowed to do it, we believe the UK industry could have the potential. there's enough gas down there equivalent to another North Sea. That's a best case scenario. But if that's the possibility, why on earth aren't we exploring that possibility?
Charles, how can you... I mean, where are Labour on this? You guys are lobbying right across the political spectrum. I see Keir Starmer sort of slightly less vociferously against fracking than he used to be, even though the Parliamentary Labour Party is almost universally opposed. There are some red wall Labour MPs who back it, Graham Stringer, for instance, and some others. But are you getting any support from Labour behind the scenes?
Well, look, I think there are some pragmatic people within the Labour Party who do get this. In terms of support, are we getting any? No, is the quick and short answer. But I think in time they will see the case again because of the logic, because of the case for this. I think hopefully they will come round to it, but we're very happy to engage with Labour.
Well, thanks a lot for that discussion. We had Tom Crotty of INEOS. Thanks a lot for coming in the studio. Charles McAllister, of course, of Onshore Oil and Gas UK. Thanks. Max King is going to stay with us. Coming up, today's Money Talks interview is with Dorothy Byrne, one of Britain's most experienced broadcasting executives. We'll be getting her take on the privatisation of Channel 4 in just a moment. That's after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
It's 1:32. I'm Rosie Wright. Good afternoon. Let's get you up to date. Ali Harbi Ali has been found guilty of murdering Sir David Amos. The 26-year-old repeatedly stabbed the Conservative MP in his Essex constituency last October. It took the jury just 18 minutes to return a unanimous verdict. He was also found guilty of preparing acts of terrorism. Ali Harbi Ali is due to be sentenced on Wednesday. Ukraine is bracing for a new attack in the east, with President Zelensky warning Russia is readying tens of thousands of troops for the next offensive. New videos also emerged showing the extent of the destruction at the National Theatre in Mariupol, which was destroyed during an airstrike, killing at least 300 people. The Austrian Chancellor will push for a ceasefire when he meets the Russian president in Moscow later. The UK Prime Minister's spokeswoman says Boris Johnson has agreed to the Chancellor's request of an independent review of his finances. It's after it emerged that Rishi Sunak held a US green card while in office and that his wife holds non-domicile status that has significant tax implications. The Chancellor says he followed the rules and hopes the review will provide further clarity. Millions of people in the UK will see a rise in their state pensions from today, but it won't be enough to match the growing cost of living. Pensions and universal credit benefits have increased by 3.1%, but the Office for Budget Responsibility says inflation could hit a 40-year high of 8.7% this year. The Queen has revealed she was left very tired and exhausted during her bout of coronavirus in February. The monarch made a video call to Royal London Hospital this week, sympathising with a former COVID patient who lost his brother and father to the illness. You're up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. Stay with us. Liam will be back shortly for more of On the Money.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Cloud for many of us through the rest of the day. Some showery rain as well, particularly towards the west and later the north. And it will be breezy, that breeze coming in around an area of low pressure which is sitting to the west. Now this is the feature that is sending some areas of cloud and outbreaks of showers or rain. These showers have had thunder associated with them as they push in from the west, but I think mostly it's just going to be some heavy bursts of rain that will move into parts of Wales, Northern Ireland, and then eventually parts of central England later. Another area of rain moving through Scotland. A lot of cloud on the map, but some brighter spells, and it'll be a gusty breeze, but that breeze is coming from a mild direction, so 18 Celsius possible in the southeast, mid-teens generally elsewhere. Still quite cold for Lerwick. And then through the night, showers or outbreaks of rain move through northern England into Northern Ireland, Scotland as well. Some persistent wet weather for eastern parts of Scotland with a keen breeze here. And then further showers follow from the south. Again, a few rumbles of thunder possible towards the southwest and Wales. But it's a mild night, 6 Celsius in Glasgow, 10 Celsius for southern England and South Wales. Heavy rain or showers for many as we start off Tuesday. They push north, an area of rain clearing from the Northern Isles, and then for further rain arriving into northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland through the day. That wrapped round into parts of southeast England, so some wet weather to come here. Brighter skies for Wales, western England as well, and temperatures reaching the high teens. But even here, there'll be a few scattered showers around and some heavy downpours in places. Into Tuesday evening, showers and rain tend to migrate northeastwards. Some clear spells at times, but for many it's another mild night. And actually, the weather is warming up, although we'll keep a lot of cloud in the sky during Wednesday, Thursday and Friday. Temperatures will reach the high teens or even low 20s.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
And welcome back. It's 1:38. You're on the money. Now, before we continue with our show, let's get more on that guilty verdict in the Sir David Amos trial. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, is at the Old Bailey, where a jury took just 18 minutes to reach their decision. Mark?
Liam, yes, it was incredibly quick. The events this morning, in fact, had gone very quickly. We had initially believed this morning that this was a case that might move into tomorrow in terms of the summing up by the judge and the closing statements by prosecution and defence, but it all zipped by very quickly. The jury were sent out just before lunch, and then, as you say, 18 minutes later, back into court number 2 here at the Old Bailey for the dramatic reading of those verdicts. Count number 1, the preparing acts of terrorism charge. Again, the jury found him guilty unanimously. And then on that second count of murdering the Conservative MP, Sir David Amos, Ali Harbi Ali was found guilty, again unanimously. This is a trial that took place over several weeks here at the Old Bailey, postponed for some of the time due to an outbreak of COVID, but when it got underway it wrapped up really rather quickly. Sir David Amos had been holding his constituency surgery on the 15th of October last year inside that Baptist church in Leigh-on-Sea in Essex, a regular endeavour for him and of course politicians throughout the country as they hold these constituency surgeries to make themselves accessible to members of the public, but that does open them up to a risk, and the risk of course on this particular day, unbeknownst to anybody, was that terrorist Ali Harbi Ali had been planning to attack, to stab this MP to death for what Ali Harbi Ali, and evidence that he gave to the Old Bailey, was to do with his voting record. The fact that Sir David Amos had voted Syria, in particular Aleppo, in 2014 and 2015. And in his evidence, Ali Harbi Ali said that he had no remorse for his actions and that he would do it again, as he said, to try to save the lives of other Muslims. But that didn't at all influence the jury in any way. They took a very short time just to deliberate for 80 minutes, to come back and then to pass those verdicts. I've been looking back at the murder of a much-loved local MP.
Yes, we're TA, we're waiting.
Outside this Baptist church in Leigh-on-Sea, the first police arrived to reports of a horrific stabbing.
They say he's got a knife and he's just stabbed someone.
He's got a knife, but he's allowing you to go in and see
Lying critically wounded inside the church, local MP Sir David Amos.
At the same time, we've got a taser unit 1 minute away, so we're going to go in and take a taser.
Just moments earlier, frantic 999 calls for help.
Police, please, quick now. The man is wielding a knife and he's threatening me. He's killed David Amos at Belfast Methodist Church.
With the attackers still inside, the unarmed officers decide they have to push forward.
Mate, drop the knife. Drop the knife now! Get it down! We got it. Right, search him.
With the attackers subdued, medics were finally able to reach the stricken MP. But Sir David died at the scene, having suffered more than 20 stab injuries. As he was booked into custody, terrorist Ali Harbi Ali openly admitted his motivation.
Domestic or hate-related in any way? Pardon? Terror.
Earlier, CCTV captured him leaving his London home, heading for Sir David's regular constituency surgery. In his rucksack, the 12-inch-long murder weapon.
When I first came in,
Despite denying murder in court, in police interviews, the 26-year-old was more candid.
Mr. Ali, is this a terrorist attack?
I mean, I guess, yeah, I killed an MP and I've done it. Yeah. Okay.
Ali showed the first signs of radicalisation in 2014 and was briefly referred to counter-extremism programmes.
It's a reflection of the challenge we face in counter-terrorism today. So after 16 years as a counter-terrorism detective, the threat has diversified significantly. And if an individual is going to sit at home on their own, conducting research, and not tell anyone else about their case, that's part of the challenge that we face. But we do that with the family of those that have been radicalised, with the public, to take every attempt to disrupt and detect terrorism where we can.
Ali had been planning an attack for at least 5 years before he finally struck, scoping out a number of potential victims, including Cabinet Minister Michael Gove, even writing down possible methods of attack, like targeting him during his morning jog. Fellow Cabinet Minister Dominic Raab and Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer were also in his sights.
Southend should be the city of culture.
In the end, he settled on Sir David Amos, an easy target, always accessible to his constituents.
David was a very special person, and that is why there's been such a deep feeling of tragedy after his murder. This was no ordinary MP, this was someone who was completely dedicated to his job. And to lose someone like that, I think it's affected us all. It's certainly affected me very badly.
That feeling of profound loss was felt most keenly in Sir David's constituency, where locals developed a deep respect for a politician who dedicated much of his time to campaigning for Southend to gain city status. That mission completed posthumously. As he begins life behind bars, Sir David's killer has never shown any remorse for the murder of a much-loved and deeply respected Member of Parliament. Mark White, GBNews. Well, the murder of Sir David Amos once again highlighted the concerns over the safety of politicians, and it prompted a review of those safety measures with new ways of working and advice given to politicians and practical help given to those who are particularly concerned. Of course, we know it followed the murder of MP Joe Cox and a number of other incidents where MPs have been threatened or physically abused in recent years. But, of course, MPs themselves readily admit that in a free and open democracy where they've got to make themselves accessible to members of the public, that does come with its risks. Well, Ali Harbi Ali, who has now been found guilty of the murder of Sir David Amos and also this preparing acts of terrorism charge, will now, in all likelihood, be given a whole life tariff. In other words, he will never see the light of day again. He comes back here on Wednesday for sentencing.
Well, Mark, I remember back in October when the shocking news came through of that attack on Sir David Amos, somebody I knew well from my time in journalism. I was sitting in this chair. It was a ghastly thing to have to cover, and now at least some form of closure for Sir David Amos's family and friends and the public as a whole. Mike White there, GBNews Home and Security editor outside the Old Bailey. Time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks, and my guest this hour is Dorothy Byrne. She's a hugely influential figure in the world of broadcasting and was part of the World in Action team during its heyday in the 1980s. And she served as both editor-at-large and head of news and current affairs at Channel 4. Well, Dorothy's now president of Murray Edwards College, a female-only college at Cambridge University. And here she is, broadcasting legend Dorothy Byrne, my latest guest on Money Talks. Well, Dorothy, great to have you on the show. I guess we should start this on-air conversation by me declaring that you gave me my first job in television many years ago, and I think my producer Rosie was determined to get a picture of me aged 27 or 28 up on the screen, and there it is. So, Dorothy, you and I have known each other for a long time. I've made documentaries for you over the years, though, of course, no longer, because you're no longer at Channel 4 and I'm now at GB News. But I thought we should get that out there on the record. It's great to have you on the show.
And what a gorgeous creature you were. And I'm sure you still are.
Key word there, were. My producers just said to me in my ear. Crikey. Can we talk now about the future of one of Britain's most important broadcasting organisations, which is Channel 4? Dorothy, do you see any logic in the case that the government is making to privatise Channel 4? Any merit at all?
It doesn't make sense, but I can see there might be some sense in allowing Channel 4 to borrow some money. I don't think it needs to borrow vast amounts of money to try to rival Netflix and Amazon, which is one of the things Nadine Dorries has said. It will never rival either of those two organisations, but it might be good to give it some leeway to borrow some money in some fashion. But I don't think, because that is a good idea potentially, that we should throw out the whole model, which has been massively successful, both in terms of producing great programmes made by people like you, Liam, and also in producing a fantastically successful independent television sector. Independent television companies were created by the creation of Channel 4. And Channel 4 is still a really important part in seeding new independent production companies. And this sector produces literally billions of pounds for the country. So I personally don't see a good argument for messing with something which costs the taxpayer nothing and makes lots of money for the economy.
OK, let me ask you a question, Dorothy. Let's grasp this nettle. A question that's personal to both of us. I spent many years at Channel 4 News. Do you think Channel 4 News has been too biased in recent years? Do you think that might be one reason why the Conservatives want to privatise Channel 4? And if that is one of their reasons, have they got a point?
I don't think that's the reason. I think that's a red herring, and that the truth is that this is part of what's also happening with questions being asked about the BBC licence fee. It's throwing a bit of red meat to right-wing supporters of Boris Johnson who are not very happy with him at the moment. And these look like simple knee-jerk solutions, like, oh, you know, privatisation is always good. Well, sometimes it is good and sometimes it isn't. With regard to Channel 4 being biased, of course, that is a claim made by some right-wing Conservatives. Lots of Conservative MPs, by the way, absolutely love Channel 4 News. And I would say it's more watched by Conservative MPs, in my experience, than it is by Labour MPs. They really enjoy the 1 hour, the in-depth international coverage. When people have made these claims, what you have to do is look at the regulator and what the regulator has said about Channel 4 News and current affairs. And the regulator has not said that it is prejudiced. It's cheeky, and may I point out, Boris Johnson is cheeky. So when Boris Johnson failed to turn up for a climate change debate, he was instead, substituted for by a large block of ice. Well, that made the point of empty chairing him in a cheeky way. But the regulator said, well, that's Channel 4's right to be cheeky. And I like the idea of being cheeky to our politicians. It's similar to a cheeky cartoon. It's not a political statement. We were just emphasising the point in a witty and original way that he didn't turn up.
Dorothy, what would you say to the charge which some government ministers are making that Channel 4 as a whole isn't what it was when it started in the early 1980s, throughout the 80s, 90s? There were, Dispatches, a major strand of documentaries, which I've made films for in the past, which you oversaw. It used to be, really chunky 1 hour films. We used to have cutting edge, literally, documentaries on Channel 4. Now it's soaps and it's naked attraction. So Channel 4 has kind of dropped the ball in terms of its public service remit. Do you think there's some truth in that, as a former documentary maker yourself?
Well, I still make documentaries, actually. The past always looks like a better place, especially when we see photos of ourselves when we're young. But actually, two of the best things that I was ever involved in my whole history in television were, firstly, For Sama, which was a fantastic Oscar-nominated documentary about Syria, and the other was the terrific investigation carried out by Channel 4 News into Cambridge Analytica, an investigation which was cited round the world and discussed in the US Senate. It was one of massive influence. At the moment, I've just finished making a 3-part series for Channel 4 about Ghislaine Maxwell. I mean, a really difficult, expensive, thoughtful television series. And my last project for Channel 4 was a lengthy program about Navalny. So, no, I think it is still up there doing great things. Just in some ways, it's harder now to break through and be different because there's so much out there on the internet. But there's still a massive role for Channel 4 News that isn't being fulfilled elsewhere, and for its current affairs and documentaries.
Dorothy Byrne, thanks for your time. This is a debate that will rumble on. It's great to have you on the money here on GB News. Dorothy Byrne there, the former head of news and current affairs at Channel 4. Thanks for joining us. Max, briefly, will it go through?
Well, I think the idea which I sort of read about in the Sunday Times yesterday is a better one, which is a stock market flotation, which will enable the government to maintain an investment and get a much better price for it. It'll also keep the channel much more responsive, much more accountable, and that might be a spur to better programming. I mean, for most people now, Channel 4 has become, Dispatches has largely gone. It's now Countdown, plus a lot of weird programs you briefly flick through when you press the wrong button on your remote. I think it can do much better than that. And I think a flotation might help it do that.
Max King, great to have you on the show today. Thanks for all your comments and see you next week.
Maybe.
Lots of emails have been flooding in today about the pension increases that we highlighted earlier. The increase in benefits, 3.1%, when inflation is 7.4%. So benefit rises are way below the increase in the cost of living. Virginia says, I believe the state pension should not be classed as a benefit, as such people have paid in this for years when they retire, and it never used to be called a benefit.
Great point.
Adrian said benefit payments shouldn't be high. They should encourage people to get a job. Many people don't want to work, as well as those that do. What about help for working people who struggle due to a lack of pay rises? And David says, I'm a pensioner and I have to think to myself, should I buy a loaf of bread or heat my house? The increase of pensions is not enough and I'm struggling, says David. Keep your emails coming. Remember, this is a 2-hour special on the money, so don't go anywhere. Stay with us. We've got another whole hour coming, you lucky people. So stay with us. You're on the money.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Cloud for many of us through the rest of the day. Some showery rain as well, particularly towards the west and later the north. And it will be breezy, that breeze coming in around an area of low pressure which is sitting to the west. Now this is the feature that is sending some areas of cloud and outbreaks of showers or rain. These showers have had thunder associated with them as they push in from the west, but I think mostly it's just going to be some heavy bursts of rain that will move into parts of Wales, Northern Ireland, and then eventually parts of central England later. Another area of rain moving through Scotland. A lot of cloud on the map, but some brighter spells, and it'll be a gusty breeze, but that breeze is coming from a mild direction, so 18 Celsius possible in the southeast, mid-teens generally elsewhere. Still quite cold for Lerwick. And then through the night, showers or outbreaks of rain move through northern England into Northern Ireland, Scotland as well. Some persistent wet weather for eastern parts of Scotland with a keen breeze here. And then further showers follow from the south. Again, a few rumbles of thunder possible towards the southwest and Wales. But it's a mild night, 6 Celsius in Glasgow, 10 Celsius for southern England and South Wales. Heavy rain or showers for many as we start off Tuesday. They push north, an area of rain clearing from the Northern Isles, and then further rain arriving into northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland through the day. That wrapped round into parts of southeast England, so some wet weather to come here. Brighter skies for Wales, western England as well, and temperatures reaching the high teens. But even here, there'll be a few scattered showers around and some heavy downpours in places. Into Tuesday evening, showers and rain tend to migrate northeastwards. Some clear spells at times, but for many it's another mild night. And actually, the weather is warming up, although we'll keep a lot of cloud in the sky during Wednesday, Thursday and Friday. Temperatures will reach the high teens or even low 20s.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
And welcome to the second hour of this On the Money special. I'm Liam Halligan and we're about to talk about food prices as a leading United Nations Food Agency reports that prices across the globe rose no less than 13% in March alone, in part due to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. As ever here on The Money, grown-up discussions with people who really know their stuff. All that after the GBNews headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 2 minutes past 2. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. Now, Ali Harbi Ali has been found guilty of murdering Sir David Amos. The 26-year-old repeatedly stabbed the Conservative MP in his Essex constituency last October. It took the jury just 18 minutes to return a unanimous verdict. He was also found guilty of preparing acts of terrorism. Ali Harbi Ali is due to be sentenced on Wednesday. The Austrian Chancellor is going to push for a ceasefire in Ukraine when he meets the Russian president in Moscow later. Ukraine is braced for a new attack in the east, with their president, Volodymyr Zelensky, warning Russia's readying tens of thousands of troops for the next offensive. New videos also emerged showing the extent of the damage at the National Theatre in Mariupol, which had been destroyed during an airstrike that killed at least 300 people. The Ukrainian president says thousands of people have died in the city.
And there can be no hope that Russia will simply stop on its own. And there can be no hope that reason will prevail and the Russian authorities will simply refuse to continue this war. Russia can only be forced to do so, can only be forced to seek peace, be forced to stop torturing people, be forced to respect the independent life of the neighbouring nations, be forced to leave the territory of Ukraine.
The Prime Minister's spokeswoman says Boris Johnson has agreed to the Chancellor's request of an independent review of his finances. Well, it's after it emerged that Rishi Sunak held a US green card while in office and that his wife holds non-domicile status that has significant tax implications. He says he followed the rules and hopes the review will provide further clarity. The Shadow Justice Secretary, Steve Reed, told GBNews the Chancellor's failure to declare his wife's non-dom status is just one of many concerns.
The Finance Act that's just gone through Parliament, there are changes to the rules that benefit wealthy non-doms. Now, under the Ministerial Code, ministers are supposed to declare that kind of thing so that they can recuse themselves and not take part in decisions that will affect their own household income. There are a whole list of concerns like that about Rishi Sunak's behaviour, and we need to get to the bottom of it.
Millions of people in the UK will see a rise in their state pension, but it won't be enough to match the growing cost of living. Well, pensions and universal credit benefits have increased by 3.1% today, but the Office for Budget Responsibility says inflation could hit a 40-year high of 8.7% later this year. Pensions analyst Helen Morrissey told us the financial boost is not enough.
With inflation already at 6.2% and looking to go higher over the next few months, it's a drop in the ocean when they're battling against soaring bills and food costs. Heating costs are on the rise as well, and they're going to really struggle to make ends meet, particularly those people who are very, very dependent on the state pension.
Lorry drivers staging a protest in Dublin are being fined for blocking main roads to the port. Demonstrating against fuel prices, the drivers shut off a toll bridge and threatened to bring a complete lockdown to the city. They're also demanding the resignation of the Transport Minister, Eamon Ryan. In France now, and Emmanuel Macron is going to face Marine Le Pen in the second round of the presidential election. Both were seen back on the campaign trail in northern France and Paris this morning. The incumbent president and his far-right rival came out on top in Sunday's first-round vote. That sets up a repeat of their 2017 runoff. A number of polls are predicting Macron will win with a tight margin. All the major candidates in the election, bar one, have now called for tactical voting in the next round against Le Pen. The Queen has revealed she was left very tired and exhausted during her bout of coronavirus in February. The monarch made a video call to Royal London Hospital this week, sympathising with a former COVID patient who lost his brother and father to the illness. The Queen tested positive in February, and despite suffering what the palace called mild cold-like symptoms, Her Royal Highness was determined to carry out what duties she could.
I'm glad that you're getting better, and it does leave one very tired and exhausted, doesn't it, this horrible pandemic.
You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, let's return to our special extended edition of On the Money.
And coming up in this hour on The Money, we're talking about the price of fish. Well, fish, meat, bread, vegetables, all food in fact. As a leading United Nations food agency reports that food prices across the globe rose 13% in March alone, not least due to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We talked to farmers, flour millers and a host of others as food prices spiral, with benefits falling in real terms, and the UK grapples with the tricky question of food security. Once again here on The Money, grown-up conversations with people who know their stuff. Plus, there's congestion at Dover and other ports amid staff shortages linked to COVID and cancelled ferry service. This hour's Money Talks is also with a leading entrepreneur in the hair and beauty sector. Have hairdressers and beauty salons recovered from lockdown restrictions? These firms are a crucial part of so many UK high streets. So are they sitting pretty or looking out of sorts? That's later in the show. And keep sending in those questions, opinions, ideas. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. Stay with us because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan. You're on The Money. Even before the war in Ukraine, UK inflation was at a 30-year high. As we emerged from lockdown, demand surged, but global supply chains remained broken, pushing prices up. Then, at the end of February, Vladimir Putin staged his invasion, sending fuel and goods markets into overdrive. World food prices jumped nearly 13% in March alone, a single month, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, part of the United Nations, in large part due to the impact of this Russia-Ukraine conflict. There's no direct military confrontation between Russia and the West, of course, but there is an East-West economic war. The US, UK and the European Union have imposed sanctions on Moscow, blocking, to varying degrees, trade into and out of Russia, including huge amounts of wheat and other foodstuffs, as well as fertilizer. Both Russia and Ukraine are major producers of wheat and other crops, millions of tons of which are shipped out via the Black Sea to the south of Ukraine, now mired in conflict. Many leading sea freight lines are also refusing to handle goods originating from Russia. With global food prices spiralling upward, attention's turning to UK domestic production. But prices for the fuel and fertiliser that farmers need are also soaring, making homegrown food more expensive too. We're suffering serious agricultural inflation, says the National Farmers Union. They're not kidding. One measure of the cost of UK farmers' imports, including fuel and fertiliser, shows costs up 30% on a year ago, which of course feeds into the price of food in the shops. So that's our On the Money debate today, our second debate. How can we stem spiralling food price inflation? More fantastic guests here on The Money. We have dairy farmer Steve Evans making his return to On the Money. We have the director of UK Flour Millers, Alex Waugh, and chief economic strategist at Net Wealth, Gerard Lyons. Plus, in the studio with me is the head of investment at Interactive Investor, Victoria Scholar. Gerard Lyons, let's go to you first. You have a huge amount of experience as an economist working across the world, particularly the so-called emerging markets. How serious is it, do you think, Gerard, when the Food and Agriculture Organization says that inflation is up 13%, food inflation, in a single month?
Well, firstly, it's great to be on the show again. In answer to your question, yes, it's very serious. It's very serious, not only immediately, but highlights a longer term issue in terms of the whole issue of food security and food demand and supply in the future. But if we look at the current problem, this year the world economy looks like it will slow. But one of the factors that's really leading to challenges for the world economy is higher inflation. And one of the big risks globally, as well as in the UK, is that inflation is basically now rising so much, inflationary expectations are creeping much higher, that it's going to be very difficult to control. But if we look at one component, the food side, this is very difficult for policymakers to get on top of. You mentioned the United Nations Food Price Index. Last year, food prices had already surged. Now they're soaring again. Last year, food prices, well before this war, obviously, had risen by 28%. This year, the year-on-year increase is 33%. Now, one of the major features, if we look back at food prices over recent decades, has been the influence of oil and energy costs. For instance, back in 2008, food prices rose 25% because of higher oil prices. They then fell 2009 by 22%. So sometimes we can see erratic movements, but food prices are heavily influenced by energy costs. Energy costs have risen. But also maybe, before I go back to you, if we look at the subcomponents of United Nations Food Price Index, meat, dairy, cereals, vegetable oils, sugars, often they're heavily correlated. That is, their prices move together. And one of the big worries at the moment is the extent to which those subcomponents are not only seeing external influences lead to higher prices, but we're starting to see supply shortages, particularly because of the war in cereals, but we're starting to see disruptions in many areas. So these are immediate challenges leading to higher inflation. The longer term issue, of course, is that food demand is expected to rise and food supply is an immediate issue and also a longer term issue.
Fantastic big picture over there from Dr. Gerard Lyons. Let's zoom in to the specifics. Let's go to Steve Evans. Steve, you're a dairy farmer in Wales. We've talked a lot on this programme about the price of milk going up, the price of feedstock going up, the price of fuel going up. What's the reality in your day-to-day life as a dairy farmer?
A week since I spoke to you last. A week is a long time in agriculture. Dear God. I've had to buy more fertiliser. I was hoping to hang on till May, but unfortunately the market is on the move again. It slipped back a little bit last week, so I jumped in and purchased a urea-based product. It's cost me just over £1,000 a tonne. The payback on that versus not using it is still, even with it being over £1,000 a tonne, is about 2 to 1. But the impact, the short-term impact on cash flow is phenomenal, because effectively last year I would have paid somewhere around £13,000 for an Arctic load to come in. This load is now costing me nearly £30,000.
Wow. More than twice as much.
It's incredible. It's incredible. That coupled with fuel is still floating around. Red diesel now is still floating around about £1 a litre. My feed contract finished at the end of March, so none of the feed companies will give you a forward contract for the winter coming. They've allowed me a contract up until September, which is £130,000 more than what I was on previously.
For the same amount of feed?
Same amount. Carbon copy.
That's a huge increase. That's a huge increase.
And then just one other thing as well, right? We're spending money on fertilizer. We need the fertilizer. We have to stimulate crop growth for livestock grazing, to grow the cereals, this, that, and the other. one of the key components of that is ensuring soil pH is correct.
Yeah, the acidity, yeah.
This fertilizer, otherwise this fertilizer we're putting on is only about 50 to 60% efficient. The rest of it will just leach away. So ground limestone is a key part to this. That has now gone up because the quarries are now forced to use white diesel because of government policy. They've had to move away from using red onto white. So now that's gone up another 10%. So you can understand why farmers are cutting back, because they're trying to manage risk. This is all about risk. We're not in a big way of business here, but when you're talking those sums of money, it's astonishing.
Steve, let's just hear from Alex Waugh, who's the director of UK Flour Millers. We heard there from a dairy farmer, Alex. He's talking about feedstock, what he feeds to his livestock. Your main raw material as a flour miller is wheat and other soft commodities. How are the prices that you are facing behaving?
So it's the same story. Liam talked about cash flow, and that's really the big story as far as pretty much all foodstuffs are concerned. So an average size flour mill will see its bill for wheat go up by £15 million in the course of this year on the basis of today's prices. They're up by about 60 to 70% year on year. And only about half of that is to do with the war in Ukraine. As Gerard said earlier, we'd seen rising prices earlier on in the year, so that in the last 12 months, as a result of shortages in some qualities of grain around the world. So it's grain is what we see most. That's our biggest cost. But in terms of the size of increase, power is way bigger in percentage terms. Looking at gas and electricity prices up 300%, and that's okay provided you've got a fix in place, and everyone is has got some degree of hedging in place. But those hedges run out, and as they begin to run out, you'll see a sudden big increase in costs coming through. It's not a gradual increase as markets move up. It's all in one step where you move from hedged to unhedged. And that's going to
Alex, hold that thought, Alex. I want to bring in Victoria Scholar after the break. We're going to carry on this discussion. It's an important discussion. I don't apologise for returning to it. To my mind, this is the most important story in the British economy at the moment, and indeed the global economy. The price of food spiralling, the fact that we're not planting as much as we would normally at this time of year, which means that will knock on. So after the break, we will keep this discussion going with my expert panel, hearing about how those food price rises are affecting one cafe as well in Ferrybridge. So stay with us. It's all happening here on The Money.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London EC3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Welcome back. It's 2:20. You're on the money. We're talking about the price of food. We've got a dairy farmer, Steve Evans. We've got the director of UK Flour Millers, Alex Waugh. We got Gerard Lyons, who's chief economist at Netwealth, a very, very experienced analyst. And in the studio, we've got the head of investment at Interactive Investor, Victoria Scholar. Great to have you on the show, Victoria, as ever. To what extent are these food price rises, 13% in March alone globally, according to the United Nations, impacting financial markets? In the end, there is nothing more important to trade, is there, than food?
Yeah, well, obviously these soft commodities have been rising sharply. We've seen the prices of vegetable oils and cereals and meat hit record highs, and sugar and dairy not far behind, also rising very, very rapidly. I think that sunflower oil is a really interesting market to look at as a result of the financial crisis from Ukraine, because 80% of those exports come from Ukraine and Russia, and we're seeing real tangible impacts in the supermarket. We're seeing rationing by some of the supermarkets like Morrison's and Waitrose.
It's in everything. It's not just oil in the pan. It's margarine. It's beauty products. It's in everything.
Tea biscuits.
It's can't do without them.
Pasta, definitely not.
That's serious.
Sauces. It's literally in everything. And the difficulty is, you might think, right, well, they'll substitute away to other oils like rapeseed oils or palm oils. But that then just pushes those prices higher as well. So we are seeing these price rises across the board, and they're very, very difficult to avoid because it's really hard to find substitutes.
And of course, because there is fear in the market, because there are pictures of war on television, there's speculative pressure also getting behind these commodity markets, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the difficult things with inflation, and it's why a lot of people talk about spiralling inflation, because when there are inflation expectations that go up as well, then a lot of individuals or businesses might bring forward their decisions on purchases. So they'll buy sooner, which will push prices higher, and that's how it can get out of control. And I think that's what a lot of economists and market analysts are really, really worried about.
Let me bring Gerard Lyons back in. Gerard, you've written lots and lots about the global economy over many years, particularly in the emerging markets. We know that the Arab Spring back about almost a decade ago now was caused by food price rises. A lot of political instability can be caused by food price rises. It strikes me that the price rises that are going on now are even more serious than then. So beyond the very important question of food security here in the UK, there are also big geopolitical questions at stake here.
Host of issues. If one takes the United Nations, which you mentioned at the very beginning, food security for them in terms of food hunger is a big issue in terms of many poor countries not having access to food. What we're seeing at the moment is a price effect that clearly is having a global implication. Then add in the war, we're then starting to see a supply disruption. So many countries, for instance, North Africa, Middle East, will have to start importing their cereals, not from Ukraine or Russia, but from maybe North America, maybe from Australia. That adds to the cost. So there's a price effect, there's a supply effect. But if we look beyond that, there's issues. If we just take the UK, it's easier to talk about the UK in some respects. If we look at the Consumer Price Index, a quarter of the items in it and 10% by actual weight are linked to food. So there's a direct impact there. Last December, by chance, the government released a food security report. What we have in the UK is that we import 48% of our food. We have a big trade deficit in food. So therefore, we have to address that. That also implies post-Brexit the great opportunity to change our agricultural policy domestically. And the other issue on top of all of this is the environmental issue. In that food security report from the UK last December, and this is seen globally across other countries, soil degradation, availability of water, climate change. Ironically, if you think about it, Russia, as well as China and Canada, are seen as three of the countries that might have longer lasting periods to actually produce food in the future. Maybe also, just to add, this morning in the consumer price data from China, importing of food, not a big issue in the past in China, but in China in recent months, the government has asked people to stockpile food. And that's another issue here. So at the local level, you're seeing many challenges for emerging economies as well as for developed economies. So it's an immediate effect as well as the need to have a longer lasting strategy.
Steve Evans, let's go back to you. Let me say something to you which is obvious to all people in farming, as you are, albeit you're a dairy farmer, but it strikes me that around the world, not least in Russia and Ukraine, fertilizer shortages mean that we're not planting as many crops globally as we have in previous years. That means these shortages are likely to continue knocking on into next year. Perhaps that's why it's so difficult to get to buy feedstock on forward markets now, because no one knows what's going to happen come the autumn, come the next harvest.
Yeah, I'd agree. When I was on previously, I mentioned this. Good friends of mine in the UK are large cereal growers, potato growers, things like that. And you have to remember a lot of the cereals that are going to be harvested this year were grown with last year's seed corn. Last year's fertilizer prices, the impact of this is far-reaching. Yes, spring cereals, and this autumn cereals are going to be exposed to this year's input costs. But there's friends of mine just over the road are potato growers, and they are in the middle of planting now. Their most expensive time of year. £2,500–3,000 an acre to plant a crop of potatoes. They haven't seen a contract yet from their cooperative, which comes from the supermarket. So they are literally flying blind here at the moment, to a point where they've decided, right, some of the outlying land, they've decided to flick off, to not plant, to give it back to the landowner, because they don't, as I said to you earlier on, the risk management that's going on farm is incredible. And there's no real confidence in government at all, which is slightly unnerving. And, there's been too much focus over the last few years of trying to predict the rain, when really we should be focusing on building the ark. And the ark to me is a successful supply chain, and that has to come from government policy.
As our GB News Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley is at a small cafe in Ferrybridge to ask how the price increases, the increased cost of food, are affecting their businesses, and indeed the prices that they charge customers. Anna, over to you.
Good afternoon. Food prices as well as energy prices going up. In fact, we've got some products here that Fiona's business has to use every day. So we've got cooking oil. So we'll start with that one, Fiona. Thanks for coming on. Just tell us a little bit about how much this has gone up in price.
Well, this has gone up £5 within the last week, which, is about 60% increase to us. Flour for the bread, for the bakehouse has gone up £1 a sack. So that's increase a month for us. And again, sliced loaves, 20 pence a loaf. So it's quite a lot on everything. It's not, we can't just give one price out at the moment because things are going up so quickly, but we're trying to absorb as much so as customers.
And like you said, it's not just food. You were telling me earlier, you know, your prices of the minimum wage has gone up for your staff, your national insurance. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the national living wage has now gone up about 6.4%. So there's that increase, the 1.2% in national insurance, and also the energy rising costs. They've gone up 54% to us, which is, it's just massive. It really is. And, you know, we're not a luxury. We're more of a, you know, people's breakfast, people's lunches. So I want people to keep coming. So we're trying to keep us prices as low as we can for as long as we can.
And how are you doing that? Are you just sort of playing it by ear? What are you doing to cope?
At the moment, we've put certain things up, the things that have gone up most to us, by a few pence per item. But we're just playing it by ear, really. You know, every week we'll just keep reassessing it. But even doing as cash and carry order today, we've realised it's gone up over 30%. So costs are really crippling us at the moment.
And you run a bakery, don't you, as well, just over the road? What's the balance between the bakery business and the cafe business?
Well, we get all this bread from over the road, so and we work well together that way. But again, some days people want hot food, some days people want weather. Like that, so they kind of balance each other out, so we're trying to corner the market both ways.
But for now, obviously, keeping going, just keeping positive and hoping for the best.
Yeah, I think being positive is the best way. We've got great customers and Ferrybridge is a great community.
Definitely is. We were here for On Your Doorstep this morning and we met many lovely people. So yeah, businesses struggling but keeping going, keeping customers going, but that is going to be felt in the pocket of customers as well, paying those increased prices, Liam.
Anna Riley there, our Yorkshire and Humber reporter, with Fiona Marr of Adams Bakery Cafe in Ferrybridge, West Yorkshire. They're keeping going, they're keeping positive. That's what we've all got to do. And you're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Today's Money Talks interview in this hour is with Helen Ward. She's co-founder of the largest independent hair salon in the UK. Before that, here's your news update with Rosie Wright.
It's 2:32. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date on GB News. Ali Harbi Ali has been found guilty of murdering Sir David Amos. The 26-year-old repeatedly stabbed the Conservative MP in his Essex constituency last October. It took the jury just 18 minutes to return a unanimous verdict. He was also found guilty of preparing acts of terrorism. Ali is due to be sentenced on Wednesday. A meeting between the Austrian Chancellor and the Russian President is reportedly underway in Moscow. It's the first time an EU leader has held face-to-face talks with Vladimir Putin since the war started. Ukraine is braced for a new attack in the east, with President Zelensky warning Russia is readying tens of thousands of troops for the next offensive. New videos also emerged showing the extent of the damage at the National Theatre in Mariupol, which was destroyed during an airstrike, killing at least 300 people. The UK Prime Minister's spokeswoman says Boris Johnson has agreed to the Chancellor's request of an independent review of his finances. Well, it's after it emerged that Rishi Sunak held a US green card while in office and that his wife holds non-domicile status, which has significant tax implications. The Chancellor says he followed the rules and hopes the review will provide further clarity. Millions of people in the UK will see a rise in their state pensions today, but it won't be enough to match the growing cost of living. Pensions and universal credit benefits have now increased by 3.1%, but the Office for Budget Responsibility says inflation could hit a 40-year high of 8.7% later this year. The Queen has revealed she was left very tired and exhausted during her bout of coronavirus in February. The monarch made a video call to Royal London Hospital this week, sympathising with a former COVID patient who lost his brother and father to the illness. You're up to date now on GB News, but on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. Don't go anywhere. Liam will be back shortly for the extended edition of On the Money.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Welcome back. It's 2:37. This is GB News TV and DAB Plus digital radio and online. You are on the money. Now, traffic chaos continues on the M20 with more than 2,000 lorries stuck in a queue of over 20 miles to get to the port of Dover. There's been serious congestion since last week, caused by a combination of bad weather, the Easter holidays and P&O ferry routes being suspended. And it means fresh meat and other food in lorries has been delayed, costing suppliers up to £800 per truck due to claims for late delivery and loss in value. Joining me to discuss this is the UK and Ireland manager of Clear Now, a global company specialising in logistics and customs clearance. Richard Bartlett, and Victoria Scholar of Interactive Investor is still with us in the studio. Richard, let's go to you first. Pretty horrendous pictures there, aerial shots of all those lorries backed up. Is there any sign of clearance?
Good afternoon, Liam. No, not at the moment. I mean, one of the biggest issues we've had here in the UK is obviously the P&O fiasco. A lot of people, even P&O, said that this would clear up pretty quick. We're already seeing that that's not particularly happened. And that's a huge backlog because obviously lots of vehicles are already booked. You know, they're already booked weeks in advance or a week in advance. You know, they've got accounts with P&O. They're having to find alternatives. The speed's not there because obviously you're losing that regular lane every twice, 3 times a day, which you're losing. So obviously that has a backlog on all the other ferry companies, and that's what happens, unfortunately. And it's that whole knock-on effect. And we're certainly seeing, as you've seen in these, you know, it's heartbreaking to see so many vehicles parked up, and you know, there's lots of things on there. I've been in this industry a long time. That's costing each and every haulier that's sat there today. It's costing them money, and it's money they can't recoup in a lot of cases.
Victoria, it's months since lockdown ended. You get a sense that the global economy has never really got back into gear, not least the UK. Ongoing supply chain issues that we're seeing at Dover and elsewhere, that we're seeing in car factories. It all means more inflation, doesn't it? Aside from the Russia-Ukraine war.
Yeah, it's interesting because at the beginning of the year, the biggest concern for markets was inflation. And that was even before we had the price pressures between the tensions from Russia and Ukraine. But that really was laid bare by the UK growth figures this morning, because on the one hand, the service sector has been performing very, very well. We've seen a rebound in tourism and demand for accommodation and travel services. But a lot of that was offset by declines in the manufacturing industry, particularly in the auto sector and the computer goods sector, which have still been struggling with these supply chain bottlenecks.
They can't get semiconductors, can they? They can't get steel. They can't get a lot of their raw materials.
Yeah, and that's the backdrop that we're operating under even before the price pressures that have come about from Ukraine. So it's a really, really difficult one. And we get UK inflation figures later this week, and that's expected to see prices rise to about 7%. And then we're looking towards above 8% in the coming months. So some really severe pricing pressures, particularly for some consumer goods that are essentials, the likes of lower cost food. We might have seen a bag of pasta move from, say, 20 pence to 40 pence, which actually represents 100% of inflation. So although that is the headline figure, a lot of people will be saying, well, I'm actually feeling the squeeze even more than that.
Particularly lower income households who disproportionately spend on food, and thank God their energy bills aren't going up. Oh, they are. Richard, tell me some good news. Few people in this country know more about logistics and customs clearance than you. You've even been a guest here on my Money Talk show. You're that good. Crikey. Is there any light at the end of this tunnel?
Not at the moment. I think this is short term. I think long term, people, consumers have to remember the freight forwarding industry do a terrific job. They'll do everything they can to make this work for you. They're very much hindered at the moment with all the things happening, and some big changes ahead coming, unfortunately, this year with the new customs changes on the 1st of January. And we've got the food importers coming in towards the end of this year, where there's going to be no more documentation. So we're going to see some challenges. And actually, if you remember last year in our money talks, we actually predicted around 7% inflation. So we wasn't far off that prediction. I'll tell you what I am seeing, and this is interesting for a lot of consumers. We've been very heavily reliant on the Chinese markets and other markets, and I'm seeing a shift in that. I'm seeing a shift that people are actually bringing the goods closer to home. Obviously, the P&O is a short term. This will get better. It'll resume sooner or later. But we're certainly going to see a lot quicker. We're seeing long delays in China with COVID, especially with COVID. At the moment, they've closed 2 ports again, and that's a huge resource on people who are buying containers. You've got that 36, 40 days transit. People are now shifting more into Europe. So even with Brexit, we're going to see a shift in business into Europe, and we're going to see European as probably our strongest partner in the next 2 or 3 years. So it's, I think there's some positives, Liam. I think customers have to see this as short term. Don't get too worried with all the news and everything what's going on. It will ease itself, get Easter out the way. We'll start to see an ease up, I hope.
Victoria, I guess one saving grace there's lots of bad news out there. It's not just the UK. That food price inflation number that I cited at the top of the show, 13% rise in March alone. That was a global number. As Richard Bartlett was just saying there's signs of inflation in China as well. I guess, you're an interactive investor. You guys are looking at the whole global economy the whole time. This isn't just a UK phenomenon, is it?
No, this is very much a global phenomenon. We've seen President Biden in the US very, very focused on energy policy in the run-up to the midterms later this year. We've seen it crop up in terms of the French election, particularly from Marine Le Pen on the right. She's been focusing on the cost of living crisis. And in China, we had inflation figures this morning coming in at a 3-month high. They're also grappling with a potential drop to growth because they're pursuing this zero COVID policy. So they're really locking down.
And cases are rising in China.
As cases rise.
Crikey.
On the other side, we're seeing rising inflation there. So as you say, potentially this is one suggestion that it's a little bit of a saving grace. This is very, very much a global issue related to global themes, including war and global supply chains.
And yet financial markets have yet to take a significant hit. They're still resilient. Stocks and shares for the most part.
Well, we saw a bit of a tumble towards the start of the year and then another pullback when there was the onset of war. But there has been a lot of discussion about this remarkable recovery. We've seen a significant rebound, particularly in US tech stocks that were hit hard amid the prospect of rising interest rates that tend to hit debt-laden companies a lot harder. But we are seeing a lot of resilience for financial markets. But there are questions about whether we might be moving into a more secular, longer-term downswing after years of record highs that we've seen over the last sort of 5 years.
Richard, what would you say to GBNews radio listeners who are sitting in trucks waiting to go into Dover? They've been there for days in some cases. Have you got any good news for them?
The only good news I've got is they get to listen to you, Liam. So that's a bonus. No, I mean, it's tough for them, but they're used to this, Liam. You know, don't underestimate. Drivers are used to, you know, a lot of international drivers coming into the UK and leaving. They'll be adapt for this. They'll have 7 days worth of food available in the cabs. There'll be support there, people giving them support. It will ease. We just need P&O now to negotiate with government to get these ferries going. They had a failed attempt last week. They need to get this on board, and government really needs to support. Get hold of P&O and get this. Otherwise, this is going to stay for a few more days, and it's no good to anybody.
Well, Richard Bartlett, logistics expert at Clear Now. Always good to benefit from your expertise here on the show, as indeed it is with Victoria Scholar. Great to have you here on The Money once again. Victoria Scholar there of Interactive Investor, friend of the show. Lots of emails and tweets on the topics that we've discussed today. On the pension rises, Alan says the rise in the state pension only amounts to £4 a week. It's so low and one of the poorest in Europe. Virginia got in touch to say, how come the government can afford to send millions of pounds and equipment to Ukraine, but there is none for this country? Pensions are an entitlement for working. They are not a benefit. Virginia there reflecting lots of emails that we've had. Julia got in touch to say, may I add, you may, Julia, that the rise in the old age pension certainly won't even touch the increase in fuel and food, etc. It's not no heat to eat, but can't heat and little to eat. And Gary got in touch to say, what about those of us who can't work? I work from the age of 16 and I'm 48 now. I lost my job 2 years ago to health issues, and that's got progressively worse. Nothing's been done for those of us that can't work, and this needs addressing, as we're suffering the most with the cost of living. Good luck to you, Gary, and I agree. There was very little in Rishi Sunak's spring statement for people on benefits, particularly on disability benefits. And on those benefit rises, Jennifer says, I just don't understand why people can't accept that we have had an extremely expensive pandemic and are now in effect at war. And on fracking, that controversial method of drilling out shale gas, Eddie says we should only do this if we make it illegal to export any of it. We would still have plenty of North Sea oil and gas if we had not sold it all. Thanks for all your emails. Keep them coming. And it's time now for a second edition today, you lucky people, of my interview series, Money Talks. Now, a typical UK adult spends around £400 a year on hair and beauty products and treatments, with women spending disproportionately more. But hair and beauty has been one of the hardest hit industries by the pandemic, of course, with many salons not allowed to offer their services for months on end. But it's not all doom and gloom, not on this show. As the high street returns to normal, the beauty sector is making a bounce back. And an example of this is Richard Ward Hair and Metro Spa, a central London salon that's one of the largest in the UK and manufactures its own products. So here is Managing Director and co-founder of Richard Ward Hair and Metro Spa, entrepreneur Helen Ward. Helen, you are my latest guest on Money Talks. Very nice to have you here on the show. So what do you think? What could you do with this, Barnett?
Liam, I'm not even going to go there. Let's just save that to the end, shall we? It's a vision.
Oh, thank you, thank you. You say all the right things. OK, we're going to end it there.
Yes, it's over.
Hair and beauty, it is a serious sector. It's billions of pounds a year. How is your sector? To what extent has it recovered from pandemic? You guys are going well. You're in central London. You're a very well-established brand and a very successful business. Chapeau to you. But you know that lots of other shops, outlets, salons across the country have suffered badly.
They really have. And I think when we got locked down, we were the one thing that was talked about more than anything else. You know, you'd only turn on the news and you'd see not people like yourself, but, you know, roots and hair that has grown out, and people were desperate to come back in. The trouble is, they all came back in at the same time. And then, of course, so that, you know, that was very skewed for us. Everyone wanted to come in on the same day. And then, the way that we spread out our client base was all really mucked up. And then we were closed again. So we were closed in total for 8 months. And as a sector, during that time, we took a really bad hit because a lot of us still had to pay our rent. We still had all of our costs to pay. What we did find with clients, when they did come back in, it wasn't just about their hair and it wasn't about their treatments. It was about how emotionally when they felt good about themselves, how good it made them feel to come back in.
Sure.
So that was really good. But as a sector, we've been extremely hard hit. We are made up of a lot of one-man bands. You know, someone like me who meets someone, starts off a brand on their own, you know, doesn't have any necessarily skills in that sense. And we've had to learn on the job. So you learn because you've got the shop keys in your hand. So it has been really, really tough for us. We can't do what we do online. We can't put it on the back of a bike. So, you know, we have to pay our rent. We have to have our shops.
Did the government overdo it in terms of the restrictions? Do you think hair, beauty, nails, all that stuff, do you think they were overcautious?
Close contact services in our treatment rooms, like our spas, no. But I think furlough just went on for far too long.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I think we needed to come back to work. We needed to get back into the mindset, because what we've got now, we're 20% down on what we were pre-COVID as a sector. 20% down. And we've got rising costs, as we've been, as I've heard from you all day. You know, the rising costs, light and heat, of course.
And national insurance. I know you're pretty narked about the increase in national insurance. 1.25 percentage points, not just for employees, but employers as well. You've got a corporation tax rise coming down the line next year, 19 to 25%. There seems to be no relief in business rates. I don't wish to be negative, but these are all facts.
They're all facts. And the fact is as well that we are very, very massively taxed as a sector, because we have to pay VAT. And when you sell time and not goods, you can't recoup. It's an input and output tax, as we know, but you can't recoup anything back again. So all of these horrendous costs that we've faced, we've just seen closure after closure. You know, and it's really sad, because we're made up of independents and we keep the vibrancy of the high street alive. What we bring to the high street, sorry to interrupt, Liam, is not just the footfall, but the cyclical footfall.
That's right.
It's not just buying a pair of shoes, it's coming back once a week, every 6 weeks, every 12 weeks. And that has been lost when we were closed.
It's a tax on jobs, though, this national insurance rise. Is that going to stop you employing as many people as you otherwise would have done?
Absolutely.
So it's costing jobs at your
It is costing
salon.
jobs, and our sector there is a move in our sector towards self-employment, the whole rent-a-chair, rent-a-room thing. And what the long-term impact of that is going to be less trainees. And apprenticeships should be something we're fighting for. So I'm really concerned, actually. And, you know, we've heard it said so much, but there is a perfect storm of, you know, clients working from home. They're not going out, they're not having their hair done because they're not going anywhere. They're working at their laptop all the time. You know, you put that together with light and heat costs going up, business rates relief, you know, we've got another sort of year of that, but when that goes back to 10 grand a month for us in Duke of York Square, that's a big expense.
Yeah.
You know, employing staff has never been so expensive. And, you know, there is this move towards self-employment, but I don't want to be a landlord. You can't build a brand ethos by being a landlord.
Yeah. So you're a husband and wife team.
Yes.
You started up the business. How does that work? Don't you get sick of the old man at work?
Yeah, of course you do.
Do you wear the trousers?
Yeah. 30
Of course you
years.
do.
Of course I do. Do you know what? Richard deals with our... We have a brush brand which we sell in 40 countries, which is another story with all the Brexit. Don't even go there. But he sort of does that. So we split our roles, so we don't have to see each other that much.
What's the one thing that Rishi Sunak could do now to help you and your business take on more people, build more wealth, spread prosperity?
He could give us some VAT exemptions like he did for hospitality. Hospitality got so much.
So they had 12.5% VAT rather than 20 for most of the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And that's only just gone back in the last couple of days.
5% for most of it.
And you didn't have any of that, did you?
We had nothing, even though I campaigned tirelessly for it. And, you know, that's the biggest thing he could do. And this employer's NI, we knew he wasn't going to U-turn on that. But, you know, if he's not careful, he's going to make employing someone unattractive. And that's not a good look.
Tough times, but you and your husband, you're well known in the business, you're very successful. We are in a difficult position now, but how would you encourage young people, and particularly young women, to go into business, to be their own boss?
Yeah, I would say, you know, you have to have cojones of steel, you know? You really do.
I'm not going to translate that. It's
no,
a daytime
don't translate it. It's a daytime show.
Apologies to our Spanish viewers.
But you do. I mean, it's quite a difficult thing to do. If I was going to, would I do it again now at 54 years old? No. I did it when 30 years ago, 24 years old. You haven't really got anything to lose. But now it's a toughie.
Well, Helen Ward, you are Managing Director and co-founder of Richard Ward Hair and Metro Spa. Great to have you on Money Talks, and I'll be coming back for my hair consultation. You heard it here first. Crikey. You've been watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. You've had 2 whole hours, you lucky people. We'll be back at 1 p.m. tomorrow, and it's another 2-hour special. Continuing to focus on the cost of living crisis and helping you beat the squeeze. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Cloud for many of us through the rest of the day. Some showery rain as well, particularly towards the west and later the north. And it will be breezy, that breeze coming in around an area of low pressure which is sitting to the west. Now this is the feature that is sending some areas of cloud and outbreaks of showers or rain. These showers have had thunder associated with them as they push in from the west, but I think mostly it's just going to be some heavy bursts of rain that will move into parts of Wales, Northern Ireland, and then eventually parts of central England later. Another area of rain moving through Scotland. A lot of cloud on the map, but some brighter spells, and it'll be a gusty breeze, but that breeze is coming from a mild direction, so 18 Celsius possible in the southeast, mid-teens generally elsewhere. Still quite cold for Lerwick. And then through the night, showers or outbreaks of rain move through northern England into Northern Ireland, Scotland as well. Some persistent wet weather for eastern parts of Scotland with a keen breeze here. And then further showers follow from the south. Again, a few rumbles of thunder possible towards the southwest and Wales. But it's a mild night, 6 Celsius in Glasgow, 10 Celsius for southern England and South Wales. Heavy rain or showers for many as we start off Tuesday. They push north, an area of rain clearing from the Northern Isles, and then further rain arriving into northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland through the day. That wrapped round into parts of southeast England, so some wet weather to come here. Brighter skies for Wales, western England as well, and temperatures reaching the high teens. But even here, there'll be a few scattered showers around and some heavy downpours in places. Into Tuesday evening, showers and rain tend to migrate northeastwards, some clear spells at times, but for many it's another mild night. And actually, the weather is warming up, although we'll keep a lot of cloud in the sky during Wednesday, Thursday and Friday. Temperatures will reach the high teens or even low 20s.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100